Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chat, believing in my own will. Web fire, math table, scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you wanna mess with my hill. We've been 3D printing, set ready for that ghost kill.
Welcome back, Canada, and welcome to another episode of The Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever. Hope you guys are having a good Monday. This is episode 66. And we've got lots to chat about today. And so I've got a full course of the Maple Pill for you guys. But before we even get into that, I just wanted to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and share a few of mine when it comes to everything going on right now when we're talking about China, Shanghai, and the COVID lockdowns. Is anyone else's spidey senses starting to tingle just a little bit too much at this moment in time in regards to what's going on in China? Recently, I think last week, we chatted about it briefly on the Maple Pill, and I've also been sharing a couple of stories on my Instagram account recently. And I don't know. It just seems like there's almost too much showmanship at this point in time. There almost feels like there's too many videos leaking out about the government's what appears to be oversteps, their I don't know what else to call it, the war they seem to be waging against their own citizens. Do you guys really believe this is just more COVID hysteria coming from the CCP, or is there something more to this? I've seen a lot of different kind of theories bandied about. I just want to hit upon a couple here, but again, I'd love to hear your guys' ideas, your opinions, and what theories you're currently sitting on and incubating as we watch this all, unfold in real time. So one thing I've heard brought up a few times is, it's important to understand Chinese culture and the perspective that they're interpreting this. And so one of the ways, I'm probably going to butcher this, but one of the ways I saw it explained on a podcast or some live stream I was watching was they were explaining that the Chinese government needs to appear to be strong, and that if you can't control or contain this pandemic, it'll make the CCP look weak. And so because of that, that's why we see all this what seems like just wild overkill, right? These draconian, tyrannical measures being implemented against their own citizens. I don't know enough about Chinese culture to be able to say whether that has, even a grain of truth to it or not. But it's an interesting train of thought that at least could, rationalize what I see playing out right now in regards to China. Because again, if it's been, 2+ years of you and your government trying to solve the pandemic and get to zero COVID, particularly if the state maybe made big promises at the start of the outbreak and they're still struggling to contain it, yeah, maybe that would make sense. Another angle I've seen explained multiple times is this is just the Chinese government seeking to, gain more power. And so they need to play up the pandemic to the fullest extent possible in order to, take more tyrannical measures, implement more rules and restrictions on their own population. That seems plausible. Again, I don't know if you'd need to literally just be killing cats and pets the way I've seen it playing out, but maybe that works. Recently, I saw it looks like they're even destroying people's home gardens and stuff like that, which is strange to say the least, I guess. And another train of thought or another explanation I've seen made is that this is actually all just smoke and mirrors to convince the West to panic more over COVID. Again, if you guys remember the start of the outbreak back in 2020, we definitely saw videos leaking from China that showed people just dropping over dead and all kinds of bizarre things that no longer really seem congruent with our current understanding of COVID-19 and the pandemic as it's unfolded over the last 2 years. I feel like that's kind of a trick you can only play a couple times. And I would think that playing it back to back so closely would probably have extreme diminishing, returns. So that one just, I don't know, that one doesn't really fit well. And then the last one I've heard recently that, probably has really triggered my spidey senses is this idea that, actually, this is all just smoke and mirrors preamble so that China can shut down exports significantly more. And China, it appears that they've been preparing for a while, ensuring that they've got strong supply chains and, trying to not corner the market when it comes to food imports and stuff like that, but certainly making sure that they're in position to try and take care of their own. And all this, the idea of shutting down Shanghai and then eventually expanding the lockdowns further out across China is all just to cause a greater supply chain issue in America and to a lesser extent, the rest of the West. this definitely passes the sniff test when I think about what I see playing out. Again, I don't have a smoking gun on any of these theories. Just wanted to share some of the things that I've been stumbling across on my, conspiracy deep dives. Love to hear what you guys are following, what your thoughts and opinions are on this. Again, maybe it's just, crazy government's going to do crazy things, and that's Occam's razor right there. I don't know, but just want to share that with you. We will be covering a little bit on the Chinese lockdowns today, but we've got a lot of other Canadian-oriented content to cover as well. So let's just jump into it. Let me pull up my screen share here. And the first blue pill story of the day, this is from Global News. Canadians consider certain religions damaging to society survey. And so while I don't doubt that there's probably Canadians that do believe this, it is just interesting the way this is framed. And particularly, over the course of the pandemic, as we've seen it play out here in Canada, it seems like strong social bonds, and oftentimes those social bonds come from like ethnic communities or religious communities or a combination of both, were one of the few things to actually keep like COVID hysteria outside of your individual bubble, right? So whether we're talking about, Amish and Mennonite communities kind of come to mind, Hutterites. But again, we saw this across the board where when a lot of other religious institutions and religious services were deemed non-essential, certain communities decided to like break those rules, right? And, their faith was strong enough that they were willing to go against Caesar, or the government in this case, and continue to host their religious services regardless of, the mandates of Justin Trudeau, their local premiers, and, their health officials and administrators. And so I guess what's interesting is I can't help but notice just over the last few decades, a narrative that constantly comes out of the government that seems to be attacking religious institutions and religious beliefs, and even just the social bonds that often those sort of communities create, right? Which, in my opinion, are often in a strong religious community, it's often strong social bonds. And, the conspiracy theorist in me can't help but think that, well, this is the government not wanting a competition, right? When it comes to who's your moral and ethical authority, they want you just to turn to daddy government. But anyways, enough of me rambling on about my thoughts when it comes to religion and government and why they're probably not going to get along for the foreseeable future. But let's jump into some of the things that kind of came out around this survey. So many Canadians now believe Catholicism, evangelical Christianity, and Islam are more damaging to society than beneficial, a new survey shows, as people across the country continue to turn their backs on religion. It's not intolerance at the moment, it is discomfort, is what University of Calgary sociologist and the chair of ethnic studies said in an explanation. And that's interesting in and of itself, because that definitely feels like the opposite of the narratives we've been presented recently, right? Like at even any, any whiff, right? Any mild scent of racism, of intolerance, it seems like immediately the narrative usually is to immediately call racist, right? Call misogynist, demonize the individual that dares to have in-group and out-group preferences. So I found that interesting the way it was framed here. Again, this is worth reading from cover to cover, in my opinion, just if for no other reason, just to understand some of the weird tidbits that come out of it. The data shows that 1/5 of Canadians, 19%, now classify themselves as non-believers. And so this is a trend, obviously, that we're seeing increase and has even increased during the pandemic and lockdowns here in Canada. I think I maybe had one or two other points. So Heimstra says several factors have contributed to this. More recently, because places of worship were considered non-essential services during the pandemic and were closed. And so this is in regards to essentially, whether religious individuals feel like they're being shut out of society. And that definitely seems like a reasonable conclusion, seeing how the government literally deemed, the your moral compass, your ethical framework, potentially how you completely even organize your interpretation of reality as being non-essential. So again, if you guys want to check it out, I encourage you go check out this Global Mail article. Jumping over to the CBC, RCMP review of old sexual assault files send more than 200 back to investigators. Never going to find me being a big fan of the government, the administration, or police for that matter. And this is just another case of that. But I guess what I did want to ask is, does this seem concerning to you guys? Does this seem like a big deal? Is this the media blowing something out of proportions? And so here's a few of the key relevant facts. The RCMP has reviewed more than 30,000 of its previous sexual assault investigations and has found consistent deficiencies in how they were handled, including some instances of investigators failing to interview victims and suspects. So certainly failing to interview the victim or a suspect seems like a pretty big error. It feels like one of the top things that you're probably supposed to do when it comes to investigating. The review, which looked at sexual assault investigations that took place between 2015 and 2017 and did not result in charges, sent 327 files for further investigation, about 1% of all the files. Of those, 242 were reopened, resulting in 26 charges being sworn. So, 26 charges out of 30,000 doesn't seem like a huge systemic issue. But again, if I was a victim or knew a victim in one of those 26 situations where charges were sworn afterwards, I'd be like, why didn't we get to this a little bit sooner? So anyways, link in the video description down below if you guys want to do a deep dive on this. Next from Blacklock's reporter, electric cars unpopular feds. So this is in relation to a survey that was recently done around zero emissions vehicles, electrical vehicles, and things of that nature. And so some of the research found 66% have never ridden in or driven a zero emissions vehicle. 53% agree there are too few, if any, publicly available charging stations where they drive. 27% cannot name any zero emission vehicle makes or models. That kind of surprised me because I would have thought the vast majority of the population would be aware of Tesla, but interesting. 19% agree, I have some interest in a zero emissions vehicle, but today's options do not meet my driving needs. And 15% agreed, I have no interest. And the reason I want to highlight this is I personally believe that in the coming months and years, we're going to see electrical vehicles absolutely shoved down our throats. We're going to see any sort of dependency on fossil fuels, petroleum products, demonized to a much further extent than even what we've experienced up until this point in time. It's just interesting to see that, Joe Public seems less enthralled by the policies that politicians want to implement these days when it comes to climate alarmism versus, I guess I would have assumed that there was a lot more NPCs out there. To hear that, 15% agreed they have no interest in electrical vehicles is interesting to me. Next from Post Millennial, 53% of Canadians just $200 away from insolvency. 31% can't pay bills, according to a survey. Now, I'm always a little suspicious when it comes to these surveys, simply because, I don't know, if you ask someone, do you got too much money or too little money? I feel like most people, regardless of where they're really at in their financial life, is probably going to be like, oh, yeah, I would actually like more money. So I probably feel like I have a scarcity of money in my life. But a new Ipsos survey conducted for MNP suggests that 31% of Canadians aren't earning enough to cover the bills. Respondents said that their incomes aren't covering bills and debt payments, with 53% of respondents saying that they are $200 away from insolvency. To think that, honestly, 53% of Canadians would be $200 away from insolvency paints a pretty bleak economic picture, in my opinion. $200 is not significant. When we're talking about even what the average family can expect to pay in more groceries this year, I believe certain studies have shown, it's probably going to be, what was it, like $4,000 to $5,000 more per family, right? Which is several $100s per month in additional groceries. So again, just found it interesting. The survey in MNP reports that quarter, 25% of Canadians they have taken on more debt because of the pandemic. This includes using credit cards, 14%, using a line of credit, 7%, taking out a bank loan, 3%, or deferring mortgage payments, 3%. 1 in 5, 20%, has also reported raiding their emergency savings to pay their bills. So anyways, inflation is coming. If we can trust our fellow citizens, at least based upon this survey, it sounds like inflation is going to decimate 53% of Canadians. It sounds a little high, but I don't know. That's the narrative. CBC News, and this brings us into our first red pill story of the day. Infowars files for bankruptcy protection as founder Alex Jones faces defamation lawsuits. And curious what your guys' thoughts are on all this. So let me know in the comments section. Are you an Infowars junkie, an Alex Jones like day one supporter? Do you follow his content these days? Did you in the past? Jones, who's being sued after suggesting Sandy Hook school shooting was a hoax, says he's totally maxed out. And it is interesting to see how different news agencies are covering this information. Again, this is from CBC. Infowars has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection as the far-right website's founder, conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, faces defamation lawsuits over his comments that the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was a hoax. In its court filings, Infowars said it had estimated assets of 50,000 US or less and estimated liabilities ranging from 1 to 10 million. US creditors listed in the bankruptcy filing include relatives of some of the 20 children and 6 educators killed in the 2012 school massacre in Connecticut. I guess just it's like this is tangential here, but it's wild to think that we're 10 years out from Sandy Hook, in my opinion. That's, I guess, just me kind of navel gazing there on the passage of time, but wild to think it's 10 years. But what I want to highlight here is from Timcast, which I think gives a little bit more insight into, at least from Alex Jones' perspective, what's actually occurring. So update, Alex Jones disputes widespread claims that Infowars is filing bankruptcy. We are filing a Chapter 11 reorganization so that the federal government can come in and look at our books, Jones said. So in March, families tied to the events at Sandy Hook rejected an offer by Jones to settle their defamation lawsuit. Jones had offered to pay each of the families in the suit $120,000 to settle the case. After their refusal, they subsequently chose to reopen the case. So again, link to both of those articles in the video description down below. Love to hear your thoughts, your hot takes on all this. And if you've got any conspiracy theories, let me know as well in the chats. Next from Toronto Star. How much COVID-19 vaccine is Canada throwing out? Secrecy surrounds the real answer. What numbers we have suggest more doses are being wasted than officials had hoped. We've covered this in the past, but I thought it was worth highlighting the fact that the Toronto Star here at least tried to figure it out as well. And like I mentioned in the previous videos we've done on this, it's actually really hard to figure out how many vaccines are we throwing away, how many have expired, how many are no good. So after repeated emails, the federal agency said 759,948 doses expired in March, and an additional 429,450 will expire by the end of April. The Canadian Press reported they said almost 1.5 million of their doses have expired since January. Further on in the article, over the past 6 months, British Columbia received roughly 4 million doses, but destroyed almost 20%, equaling almost 800,000 doses. Another quarter was sent back to the federal government as expiry dates loomed. And so again, this is just interesting because you're like, oh shit, so is that like 1.5 million plus all these other numbers? Because once you start getting into it, you realize like it appears that we're throwing out millions of vaccines, in addition to the millions and millions of vaccines we're giving away. But then what is interesting too is some of the provinces are even refusing to share information. So during that time, Ontario received more doses than both BC and Alberta combined, roughly 10 million. But the province refused to provide any information on wastage at all, or a rationale for withholding it. I gotta be honest, the only reason I can imagine them withholding this information is simply because they're embarrassed by how much was wasted, or they just can't figure it out. Those are the only two logical, rational conclusions I can come to based upon the fact that they just refuse to share how much they've wasted, and they also refuse to share why they refuse to share. The federal government has publicly committed to sharing 38 million doses of its own supply with other countries by the end of the year. About 15 million have been delivered so far. The issue of vaccine wastage is a growing problem in wealthy countries confronting declining demand. And I guess, again, a few thoughts I have here is it's just interesting to even hear how some of these phrases are framed, right? The federal government has publicly committed to sharing 38 million doses of its own supply with other countries. So when we see the government giving millions of dollars to other countries for vaccines, is that separate from then the 38 million doses that we've already committed to providing? This is the sort of thing where once you start like pulling on any threads when it comes to government spending, like we tried to do when we were looking at, the previous special episodes I've done of the Maple Pill, whether it's looking at how much does the war in Ukraine cost us, or how much have we given to Ukraine, maybe is a better way to frame it, which again, I can't figure it out. I believe it was over 1 billion, maybe 1.5 billion, but that's before the 500 million more we just committed in the new federal budget. So I think we're getting closer to 2 billion. But we also talked about this when we're looking at how much does COVID actually cost Canada. There's a real issue when it comes to transparency and government spending. In this day and age, there's no reason, like we live in the information age, we should be able to easily access and figure out where our tax dollars are going. And yet the government seems to have no interest in making that information more easy to navigate for the average taxpayer. And I mean, why should you understand where your money goes? Being facetious, obviously. Next from Spencer Fernando, our institutions must earn their credibility, not demand it. It's not undermining confidence to point out when institutions like the Bank of Canada make serious errors. It's an essential part of the accountability that must exist in a democracy. And I completely agree. I think right now, and I think this is one of the reasons we saw the overreaction from Justin Trudeau when it came to the trucker protesters, is there at least seems to be a segment or a fringe minority amongst the left and amongst just the administration in general that seem to believe that like you should never dare question government, right? And which is bizarre because these same people, it feels like a decade ago or 2 decades ago during like the Iraq war, we would have expected to be one of the first ones to question government, right? And yet we live in this day and age where it's all about managing the narrative. It's all about fighting the war on misinformation and disinformation. And, you can't possibly question any of the narrative, right? The moment you do, you're immediately demonized, as racist, misogynist, anti-science, and all that. But as Spencer points out in his article here, it really should just boil down to, hey, when you perform as a government agency, you gain credibility. And when you underperform or you fail to perform, then you lose credibility. And that actually is just the way it should work, right? Like if we lived in like a free market, that's the way it would work in business. And while government, claims to have a monopoly on most of their services, we should actually still demand that they actually need to perform rather than just, claim that they perform. And one of the things that's interesting that Spencer hits on here is just some of the attacks that have been made against Pierre Poilievre. Thinking from like Jean Charest's campaign, where essentially, he's constantly taking issue with the fact that Pierre dares to question the Bank of Canada, right, and their economists, despite the fact that, like, honestly, look back 6 months at any point in time, and their guidance is almost always wrong, or at least it certainly has been during the pandemic, right? We can look back to less than a year ago when Tiff told us that interest rates were going to stay low for a extended period of time, right, for the foreseeable future. And now all of a sudden we're seeing like 50 basis point increase just last rate hike, right? And one other thing, this is a little bit tangential, but talking about the central bank, the Bank of Canada, and their credibility, this is one of the biggest issues. And those of you that have been following me for a while, that followed my real estate content, I was constantly pointing this out on the Canadian real estate channel, that the central bank assets in Canada have ballooned to a level that just like boggles the mind, and even boggles the mind in comparison to a lot of our G7 neighbors, right? So as you can see here, Canada literally over the course of 2022 into 2021 had 450,000 or 450% increase year over year growth in regards to their balance sheet assets to nominal GDP. And while when we compare this to other governments, we can see that like, hey, a lot of them had this experience as well. But in their cases, it was usually less than 100% increase, where Canada literally had 450% increase. There is going to be serious consequences, and someday there's going to have to be a reckoning, right? Whether it's the government literally declaring like a debt jubilee, where like back in the day in the Bible, where there's like, yo, you know what? No one has to pay any debts back. We're just going to do a hard reset. Whether it's them just defaulting, which is a little bit different than a jubilee, but essentially the same net result. And this, in my opinion, is not the Bank of Canada performing, and this should be creating a credibility issue for them. Like, this chart is just wild. Like, again, this makes the financial crisis, right, of 2006, 7, 8, 9, all that look like a nothing burger. And that's it right there. Again, we'll need to zoom in for you guys to even really be able to see it. But that was then, and this is now. Next from Blacklock's reporter, and this is going to bring us into our first black pill story of the day. Read your charter, feds told. So, Cabinet should read the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, a constitutional scholar told an Ottawa conference marking the 40th anniversary of the Charter's proclamation, commenting on Cabinet's use of the emergency's police powers against the Freedom Convoy. Professor John Packer said the very notion of freedom is something that clearly not enough Canadians understand, neither in our government nor in the public square. And then this is worth reading from cover to cover, but just want to highlight something a little bit further down here. So one of the panelists who was here for this event, who spoke in support of the charter, dismissed his earlier criticism of Freedom Convoy truckers as human slime and scum. Fareed Khan, a spokesperson for the Facebook group Canadians United Against Hate, acknowledged his harsh criticism of truckers. I was harsh, said Khan. I was harsh on the protesters. Yeah, you literally called them human slime and scum, and you're supposed to be the Facebook group for Canadians United Against Hate. Why is it that whenever we look at these hate groups, it seems like they often seem to shelter some of the most, divisively rhetoric-speaking individuals? And I would argue that if you're calling human slime and scum, it kind of feels like more than harsh. Some might even go so far as to call that hateful. Khan did not mention his earlier criticism of the convoy. In a series of Twitter and Facebook posts, Khan said MPs who supported protesters need to be arrested, that protest organizers deserve to spend years in jail, though none have been convicted of any criminal code offense, and that any public employee who donated money to the convoy must be fired. So why would we want this guy as a panelist when it comes to our Charter of Rights and Freedoms? Yeah. I don't get it. Next from True North, Justice Center ranks worst charter rights violators among provinces. Any hot takes here, guys, on which province did the worst and which did the best when it comes to charter right violations? It turns out there's no real winner in this. There's just like less evil. Well, if you guessed Quebec as being worst, you'd be right. But that's almost the case in, it feels like, everything, right? Like if someone's like, what's the worst blank in Canada? You'd be like, oh, probably Quebec. You don't even need them to fill in the blank. You probably just guess it's going to be Quebec. Whether it's because of their draconian language laws, whether it's because of their love of lockdowns, whether it's because of their desire to be contrarian for the sake of contrarian half the time, where they both want to be more progressive and more religious. I just don't get Quebec whatsoever. But according to the report, Quebec during COVID was easily the worst offender of freedoms guaranteed by the Charter and the worst place to live in Canada. Yep, passes the sniff test in my opinion. But the number one, or the best, I guess I should say, was Saskatchewan. Again, no surprise there. I'm not saying that Saskatchewan was, a bastion of freedom the way, Florida or Sweden was during the last 2 years. But, Premier Scott Moe, he did seem to at least, he seemed to be the first politician, the first premier for sure, that was publicly questioning the mainstream narrative and was like, you know what? I think I'd like to get back to normal sometime in my lifetime. And that's what essentially the JCCF found here. So all in all, it appears that Saskatchewan's violations of the Charter rights and freedoms were the least severe in Canada, the report concludes. It would have been cool if one province would have just not violated any charter rights. Could you imagine living in a world like that where literally the government just doesn't violate your rights? Yeah, seems like fan fiction. The counter signal. WHO and public officials considering using pandemic treaty to sanction sovereign nations. And while right now this is being framed as, if the WHO had more teeth, they could have gone after China during the initial COVID situation and threatened them with sanctions in order to get information about, the real story behind COVID-19, right? And whether was it a lab leak, was it nature? But what I want to highlight here is if the WHO, which again is an organization that I don't remember voting for a single member of the WHO. I'm pretty sure none of you guys did either. These sort of globalist agencies, if given these powers, again, we're going to see it used against us in weird and novel ways that probably are even hard to predict at this point in time. But some of the obvious ones would be like, oh, if you don't lock down hard enough, if you don't follow China's template of, lockdown, zero COVID strategy, maybe we can freeze your bank account. Maybe we can threaten to kick you out of the SWIFT system. Again, without going too deep down other conspiracy rabbit holes at this point in time, think back to wasn't there a handful of like world leaders, prime ministers and presidents of countries that really disagreed with the COVID narrative? And didn't like 3 or 4 of those dudes die? Yeah, well, it's too bad the WHO didn't have stronger teeth then, because they could have went after them in addition to, having their leaders die. Next, from the counter signal, it never ends. FDA authorizes COVID breathalyzer. I can see this coming to a world near us. We're literally like, leave your house, blow into this thing. Want to use a car? Want to go on public transportation? Blow into this thing. That's definitely the trajectory we're headed on. And we live in such clown times that I 100% would believe this is going to come to a city near us soon. So we'll see how that plays out. Again, link to the counter signal article in the video description down below. Next, from the Epic Times, China lockdown of nearly 400 million set to strike an economic blow. So this is really what we were chatting about at the start of the show. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, what your hot take is in regards to all of that. So much of this looks like it's for showmanship, right? So much of this feels like it's for the cameras. Particularly, I don't know if you saw the one video, I should have pulled it up, but it just had like an army of, I think they call them the big whites, right? Or these stormtrooper dudes here. And there was just like, there were probably at least 10 deep walking in an orderly file with these giant like smoke machines or whatever. And they were just like going down a highway. And it just looked like a low budget movie in my opinion, but they're doing this for a reason, and I don't think they're doing it just straight up because of COVID. Now, what they're trying to do it for, that's the $1 trillion question. Global news, and this brings us into our clown pill story of the day. Global news: Apple adds pregnant man and gender neutral emojis to iPhones. This is where we're at as a society. We used to just call that a beer belly or a beer gut, but now that's a pregnant dude. And here's a pregnant person, because a pregnant dude wasn't enough, apparently. And then there's a handful of other things if you guys want to see the new emojis that were released. But if you need any confirmation that we live in the clown timeline, Apple adds pregnant man and gender neutral emojis. Now, moving into a white pill story of the day, Jon Stewart's new woke show, Tanks, loses 80% of viewers after first episode. So the problem with Jon Stewart, that's the name of the show, but there is a problem with Jon Stewart, was launched in September 2021 on Apple TV. However, the show's ratings have been very much failing to meet expectations so far. And so it sounds like, according to the New York Post, the show's first episode was seen by just 180,000 U.S. homes in the first week it's debuted last fall. Measurement firm Samba TV said that number dropped to 78% to 40,000 by its fifth episode, which aired in early March. That's interesting to me. Because honestly, like 40,000 viewers. Now, again, this is behind a paywall, so there's something to that. But, if you were to compare that to something like Tim Pool, Joe Rogan, I'm trying to think like The Daily Wire, Blaze TV, all these shows are putting up much larger numbers, right, than anything you'd see here. These are like CNN numbers that we're seeing. So that's actually a white pill for me. I'm going to say that that's good. That at least it appears that in a free market, the demand for woke culture is relatively limited. Next, from the Daily Wire, Republicans weigh in after Florida federal judge rules Biden mask mandate unlawful. And this came out, further details came out after I posted already the show notes, but it sounds like as well, essentially masks will be disappearing on flights. I didn't see if there's an exact deadline, but some of the headlines I was reading made it sound like it was going to be pretty much immediately. That's a win for me. Obviously we're Canadians here. It's the maple pill. But if we see America completely go back to normal before the election, and again, I think that that's the way it's trending right now, is that America's just going to want to pretend COVID doesn't exist, because I just don't see how the Democrats are going to get elected on a plurality or a majority if they run on COVID hysteria. Unless we literally start seeing people drop dead in the streets, I just don't see how it plays out. So this is a net benefit, because this is just going to add additional pressure for America just to go back to normal, which is going to make, the polarization of Canada and our doubling down on the COVID narrative at every opportunity to even look sillier, right? We already see American sports stadiums with tens of thousands, upwards of 50, 80,000, right? 80,000, I think, for the Super Bowl. And yet somehow their health system, which as Canadians, we've always been trained and taught by the government that our health system is so superior, and yet their health system doesn't crumble under that pressure. And yet here in Canada, you can't dare let an unvaccinated person on a plane or a train, and the calls of think of the children when it comes to whether kids should be masked in school ring still very strongly on blue checkmark Twitter in Canada. And then final white pill story. I was struggling a little bit to find white pills, so I wanted to dip back into one we've discussed in the past. But if one of the conspiracy theories I brought up today, which is the idea that China is essentially trying to cause havoc in the global supply chain by forcing these lockdowns and expanding the lockdowns to 400 million. If their goal is to cause real chaos amongst the supply chain, well, I think that websites like survivalblog.com probably going to be a good resource. And in fact, they've got an entire section here. This is under like the newbies thread, but food storage lists. So it breaks down literally what you should store if you want to feed a human being for an entire year. And there's some interesting things that maybe immediately wouldn't come to mind, right? Like lay in a supply of 10 pounds of salt per member of your family. I mean, a lot of people that probably prep, they're first probably thinking fill the freezer, get some flour, shit like that. But are they really buying salt in bulk? Are they buying things like sugar in bulk? And I think regardless of what diet you're on, everyone consumes salt, right? There's not an anti-salt diet. And what's interesting is they also highlight here that there is a bit of extra salt, and that extra salt is actually to attract wildlife or game so that you can, get more meat. So anyways, if you want to learn more about food storage, if you want to learn more about prepping, if you want to prepare for a worst case scenario, I think checking out the Survival blog is a great resource. And I'm really happy that we've got such robust resources like this. And now let's jump over. That's it for our white pill stories of the day. Let's jump over now to a couple memes. So both are from Sal the Agorist. So we've got Seinfeld here. He can't be allowed to do it, Jerry. What's got him heated? George thinks Elon will ruin Twitter by letting people speak freely. Only a dictator would let people speak their minds. And this would even be funnier if this wasn't so true. Literally, like people are saying, in order to protect our democracy, we need more censorship. Well, I think when you say our democracy, what you really mean is your form of crony democracy, because there's no me involved in that. There's no Matt. I do not subscribe to that form of democracy. And while, democracy inherently is going to be imperfect because it's, tyranny of the majority, this idea that you can't allow freedom of speech in order to allow democracy to function, I think that really tells me how shitty your democracy is. And clearly what a pyramid of lies it must be built upon if that's where you find yourself, is literally having to denounce free speech. But there's a lot of blue check marks on Twitter that are more than happy to denounce free speech. And then this one, also loved it. Snoopy here. Dear IRS, I am writing to you to cancel my subscription. Please remove my name from your mailing list. I hope this works. Maybe we should all just write into the CRA and just be like, you know what? No, thank you. I'm just not going to give you money anymore until you guys show me exactly where every dollar I give you goes. Doesn't seem that crazy, right? Like when you go into a store and you pay the money, the reason you pay the money is because you know what you're getting for it. Seems to not be the case when it comes to politics, taxes, and government, which seems a little backwards to me. Anyways, that's it for today's Maple Pill. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you like what I'm doing here on the Maple Pill channel. If you guys want more Matt McKeever in your life, Matt McKeever Unfiltered on Instagram, that's the best place to do it. As well, we've got a link in the video description down below to the Problems or Profits Discord. If you guys want to find yourself in a community of like-minded individuals that are talking about the hypocrisy we see in mainstream media, the administration, and politics, if you want to surround yourself with like-minded individuals that are maybe of a prepper leaning, or at least want to make sure that they insulate themselves and their family from any potential coming volatility in the likely near future. Again, it's a fantastic community of just like-minded people. Really encourage you guys to join it. And yeah, that's in the video description down below. But I really appreciate you guys making this a two-way conversation. So I'm going to pull up the group chat, see what's going on here. We've got Farzana, we've got P58, we've got Free Faster. Having Easter dinner with the fam tonight. We'll catch the replay on the way home, but just wanted to say hello to the fringe minority. Appreciate that. We've got Graham in the chat. Bite Hunter, the 1917 Russian workers were the alleged backbone of communism. It seems we were being groomed to believe theism and its spiritual functions are non-essential to force communism upon us. Yeah, I really do think that, that idea of having a vacuum, right, when it comes to religion and theism presents the perfect opportunity, right, for communism to swoop in, to have the state be now held upon this this altar of holier than thou or better than us. And definitely, I believe the technocrats, the administrators, the politicians, they all want that halo effect, right? They want the new theism to be status in nature. Bite Hunter says, I used to watch Infowars all the time on YouTube. I'm curious, was it just Infowars being banned on YouTube, Bite Hunter, that caused you to fall off, or was there a disagreement in the coverage that Alex Jones gives? Honestly, Alex Jones was always just like on the fringe of my attention up until really the COVID-19 lockdowns. I knew people that like watched his stuff and took him seriously. It was pretty easy for me to dismiss him already just because of like the Sandy Hook stuff. And so I never just looked deep into it. But over the last 2 years, as I had to reorganize and reinterpret reality, as I started to realize just, how corrupted all of our systems seem to be, he really started growing on me. And while I'm definitely not an avid listener or a daily listener, I really enjoy seeing Alex Jones when he comes on other people's shows, because it feels like you get a distilled down version of his hot takes on any given subject matter at that moment in time. But, the 2 or 3 hour broadcasts on Infowars, for me, they just usually feel a little bit stretched out, definitely hyperbolic at times, and a lot of commercials interspersed there. So one of the reasons why I'm not a everyday listener, but again, no problem. Sandra says, "Hola, Matt. What the fuck with new emojis?" I agree. Stepfar, I sorry to ask this, but what the fuck does woke mean? No problem, Stefan. So essentially, woke just like woke is the politically correct narrative, right? It's identity politics, it's critical race theory, it's this race to victimhood that we constantly see, and this idea that like, I'm going to check my privilege, and that kind of allows me to virtue signal. So all the virtue signaling that we see these days, I would kind of group under woke. And what gets extra confusing is, while I'm going to disparage and make fun of the woke, a lot of people talk about being like awake or the Great Awakening, which is the opposite of it. So like the Great Awakening is all about people realizing like, oh, the system's corrupted, the elites are terrible at best and pure evil at worst, and I'm going to minimize my participation in their corrupt systems to the fullest extent of my abilities. I'm going to try and decouple from their corrupted systems. I'm going to try and like cut off the cancer so it doesn't spread and take over my entire being. So again, it is a little bit confusing. Yes, today is Mailbag Monday. Although I find myself in a weird So I've got a piece of mail. So first of all, thank you guys. We'll read a piece of mail. We'll go long on tonight's episode where we'll do the mailbag, and we'll just make one video like we've been doing recently. But all that being said, I'm actually trying to like dial back or cut back a little bit on my my marijuana intake. So I've been debating whether I'm going to smoke tonight or not. I think I'm going to pass, but this week is 420. I haven't really discussed it with anyone, but I think we'll go live at 8:20 Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, or yeah, Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, and just hang out. Maybe I'll bring on like my buddy Dan. Maybe I'll bring on some other random people. If you guys want to jump on a live stream, let me know. Maybe we can do it on Zoom or something. But I figure I'll do something for 420. Especially because usually what I would do is like smoke in person with people, but just never I guess I haven't built as deep of a network of stoners here up north, so probably won't be doing anything too massive at the Citadel for that. But it is Mailbag Monday. Terry says, good show again, Matt. Appreciate it, Terry. Bite Hunter Jones was kicked off YouTube for a while. Yeah, definitely. It's been a while. Sam, we watch Infowars. Alex Jones has a good heart and does give us some truth. Yeah, again, definitely not throwing shade at him. I almost wish there was like the Alex Jones whisperer, right? Like someone that would like watch his 3-hour show and then distill it down into like a 10 or 20-minute bit for me. Because again, whenever I watch a full episode, there are interesting insights, or again, even just like counter narratives or things to think about, right? He's shockingly correct more often than he should be, in my opinion, because some of the crazy shit that comes out of his mouth, and you're like, no way. And then like, if you go down deep enough rabbit hole, you're like, okay, maybe the packaging he put this truth in was a little bit bombastic, but there's more than just a kernel of truth there. Sean says, your thoughts on new bill to license journalists to speak out in social and pressure to control a narrative of daily news by Facebook and YouTube social media platforms. Have you thought about reaching out Russell Brand? He's got 5.4 million subscribers. Some are Canadians looking for a Matt McKeever to unite with as a Canadian. Yeah, appreciate it, Sean. I never honestly has crossed my mind to reach out to Russell Brand just because I don't think I would be on his radar whatsoever. And again, justifiably so. He's got a much larger audience and reach than I do. But what you bring up is absolutely concerning, right? We're going to see more and more. And like, I think if we're talking about other Canadians, is it JJ McCulloch? He's a very popular YouTuber known for being Canadian, right, and discussing Canadian issues. He's definitely not as outspoken when it comes to the government or Canadian policy, I think, as myself or someone like Mark Parvalos from Canada Poly. But he was commenting, again, even about the dangers that pose to him, right? And understand that, like, this idea that the government's going to license, essentially like grant license to these individual media outlets, and then these media outlets will be favored by big tech, essentially based upon policy or bills, right, that will be implemented in the Canadian Parliament, that then will also force big tech to pay those preferred news outlets, right, for the benefit of showcasing and sharing their news. Like, it's actually fucking wild. And honestly, if someone broke it down in simple terms, I think the average Canadian would be like, no, that's fucked. Like, didn't we just give them like hundreds of millions of dollars and we don't even know what news outlets received what amount of money? And they didn't even have to disclose the fact that the Canadian government was giving them these huge war chests of money during COVID-19. Isn't CBC already receiving over $1 billion, right? Didn't they receive $1.3 billion over the first like year and a bit of COVID lockdowns here in Canada? Why should these companies, like, it's not enough that the government just subsidizes them or gives them free money. They now also need to force big tech to put them on a pedestal. Like, it's honestly shocking that anything has any success that's counter narrative at this point in time. And it's why things like whether Elon Musk ends up buying Twitter or not, it's important that he even tries this, because I think we're seeing some of the hypocrisy bleed out, right? And I think it's starting to cause more people that were on the fence to be like, yeah, actually shit's fucked. This doesn't make sense, right? This idea that we need to, restrict free speech. We need more censorship in order to protect democracy. if your democracy is so weak that it can't be open to questioning, that it can't be open to counterfacts, and again, even lies and misinformation. If misinformation is so dangerous, and if the general public is so gullible when it comes to misinformation and disinformation, why the hell should we trust them to vote in the first place? Right? Right? If you can't trust them to separate fact from fiction or do their own research, how can we trust them to make their own medical decisions? How can we trust them to vote? How can we trust them to make the best personal life decisions, right? Shouldn't we just take all decisions away from the average person then? But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that politicians or the administration sees it the way I do. I'm sure that a handful of them actually have noble intentions, and the rest of them are just petty tyrants that want to grow their fiefdoms and grow their power. But it really is concerning, and it's only going to get worse. Honestly, like it's only going to get worse over these next few years. And I think that that's why it's important that we start focusing not just on fighting on their platforms, but building parallel institutions, right? Honestly, I should follow my own advice here, and I need to start posting on Gab and shit, right? It seems to be the only platform that actually truly respects freedom of speech. Rumble seems to be the best video platform right now available. But again, the fact that we see these other like semi like a slightly less worse version of social media come out, like whether it's Getter or Truth Social or any of these things, all that is just noise, right? None of that is signal. I think that right now, Telegram chats, Gab, Rumble, and Signal chats are really the best bastions of freedom, right? Like they're the best places of refuge for those of us that want free speech. Are you guys familiar with any other platforms I'm overlooking? Again, I upload my videos on Rumble and BitChute as well. But there definitely seems to be very little engagement, right? Almost zero comments, zero likes, zero reactions, a few dozen views per episode on BitChute, and less than a dozen views usually on Rumble. So those platforms definitely aren't like the town square the way we used to think of it, where everyone's attention is. It's still definitely Twitter and YouTube, Facebook, the mainstream media, and the mainstream social media platforms. But I hope with time, more and more of us will migrate to these alternative platforms because I don't see can they really correct course at this point in time? The existing mainstream social media outlets, I just don't see it playing out. But yeah, I appreciate you asking my opinion on this, Sean, and the fact that you'd even put me in the same sentence as Russell Brand, I take as a huge compliment. So I appreciate that. Yassi Bro says Elon outing big Twitter motivations. I think he is, right. I think that I'm not going to be the first one to comment on this, but a lot of people pointed out the fact that it seems like Vanguard, BlackRock, the Saudi royal family, making profit doesn't seem to be their primary motive anymore for investing in Twitter, at least, right? It seems to actually be controlling it. When you look at the number of or the percentage of ownership on the Twitter board, if you exclude Jack Dorsey, again, it adds up to like less than 1%. This and don't like. Sorry, I just need to take a step back there. I was about to go on a giant rant about stakeholder capitalism. I'm not sure if that's called for right now, but like this is the sort of stakeholder capitalism that they want to see, right? In China, you actually have to have a CCP political party member on your board of directors. We're heading in that direction a lot faster than most people realize. Whether it's the back door of ESG scores, right? So environmental, societal, good scores, right? I think that's what ESG stands for. Whether it's via, restriction of free speech, whether it's through some other form of stakeholder capitalism, where it's like, no, the state needs to be more involved. No, it absolutely doesn't. And I think I was thinking about this earlier today. If I was to even buy in for a moment to the idea of stakeholder capitalism, my argument would be the government's full extent of stakeholder capitalism should be that they get a cut of my profit. And then if they want to go and waste that money on social programs and other like social justice warrior things and ESG and all that, so be it. But they shouldn't literally like they're coming at it from every angle, right? They're coming at it from a policy angle. They're eventually going to come at it from a governance angle again through like ESG scores or having like government employees on board of members or board of directors, I should say. as like a member of the board of directors, and as well through like the carrot and stick issues that we constantly play out, right? Like, oh, we're going to put an extra tax on gas trucks, but we're going to give, a $5,000 cashback incentive for electric vehicles. I don't think the government should be fine tuning and micromanaging policy to the extent it is, where it's just trying to enforce its preferred decisions on us, right? Because where do you draw the line? You don't if you're big government. You constantly just see that Venn diagram creep and creep until it encompasses every single decision that the individual is able to make. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Sean says monopolizing the media. Also, new bill on social media, paying news outlets by sharing their profit. Yeah, I think I kind of mix. There's honestly so many bills, right? Like, is it C11, C18? Is it C26? And I think there's one that starts with an 8, right? Is it like C80 or 81? There's a lot of new bills coming out, all focused on fighting misinformation, disinformation, or really just making sure that the Canadian government gets the coverage that they want, right? They get the narrative presented the way that they had envisioned. Chronic says, you're too smart and complex for the average person to understand. I'll take that. Thank you. Chronic says, other people's commentary is way dumbed down. I appreciate that. And again, that also feels like a compliment to my audience. So it feels like a round of compliments to everyone. Sean says, have you thought about holding events where you could bring all Canadian convoy trucker organizers to unite on us? Yeah. So one of the reasons that I bought this physical venue that I did, there's a multitude of reasons, but one is I wanted to make sure that regardless of what the world looked like 1 to 5 years from now, that I'd be able to host events. And so I literally bought this old hunting and fishing camp, this compound, with the goal of being able to host large events, right? So we've got 20 acres here surrounded by crown land. Directly across the highway from me is a provincial park. And so one of the things we're looking at doing is just a more small limited event, July 1st. It'll be some sort of like, this won't be the name because I'm sure someone already has it, but like a Freedom Fest, a Freedom Trucker Convoy event, something like that. If you guys have certain like speakers, entertainers, or anyone that you think we should send out an open invitation to, let me know. Particularly, let us know in the Problems or Profits Discord chat. But yeah, I definitely want to host more events like that. I think another thing that I plan on doing before the end of this year is hosting some sort of Bitcoin conference. And again, I see that as a giant springboard into more IRL events. And I guess what I'm struggling with these days in regards to the idea of hosting in-person events is whether I want to pick on like one niche or try and create like an all-encompassing event. And by that, I mean, I'd love to engage, inform, and educate individuals on subjects like Bitcoin, but also like Canadian politics, but also building parallel institutions, right? Parallel media, homeschooling, all that, as well as like survivalist and basic prepper skills and things of that nature. And so honestly, I don't know whether I need to find multiple different tents or umbrellas to nestle those in, or whether I just host one larger like conference or event. So again, let me know, give me your hot takes, share your opinions. Definitely appreciate the feedback. Tony says, thanks for the red pill. Happy to provide it. Andrew Torba, owner of Gab, has tried to make it boycott proof by owning his own servers, creating an internal payment processor, and is working on starting his own bank after being canceled by so many. Yeah, and honestly, this is all going to play out in Canada as well. We've already seen it to a certain extent with the Freedom Trucker Convoy, and that's why, like, honestly, here's maybe like an unpopular opinion I've got, but if you don't have your money right, you will almost always succumb. If you have a dependent in your life, so if you're not just an island unto yourself, I'm a single dude, I'm kind of an island unto myself. Other family members and stuff, they're able to technically take care of themselves, so they don't need me or my support. Unless you're an island unto yourself, or unless you've got your financial fortress of solitude, perfectly set up, most people will crumble at some point in time when you threaten their livelihood, right? Because it's not just them, you're usually threatening their family's livelihood. And so a lot of people will end up making compromises they would have never dreamt. They'll end up being silent in moments they never would have thought they would stay silent. simply because they can't risk it, right? And that's where monetary sovereignty really comes into play. That's why I'm so orange pilled when it comes to Bitcoin. It's why I think it's so important. Is it's the only available existing solution where I think you can actually insulate yourself from monetary volatility from the state, right? Because as long as you've got your money, long as you've got your Bitcoin in self custody, cold storage wallets, right? They can't fuck with you, and that's a really powerful position. In fact, arguably, we've never in the history of humanity found ourselves in this position where you could have that sort of sovereignty. And that's why I really do see Bitcoin as one of the key pillars in creating a freer society and helping Canadians get back control of their fiscal life, not just their fiscal lives, but every aspect of their existence. So, yeah. All right. Well, appreciate you guys. And we're going to play the mailbag song. I'm going to go grab the letter off my desk here, and then we'll jump into a Mailbag Monday. All right. Thanks, guys. Be right back.
Welcome to the Mailbag Monday show with your host, Matt McKeever. Let's open some mails, leave some smoke trails. Mailbag Monday. Send Matt a pack and it's gonna be a fun day. Mailbag Monday. Send Matt a pack, live stream every Monday. Mailbag Monday. Send Matt a pack and it's gonna be a fun day. Mailbag Monday. Send Matt a pack, live stream every Monday. Welcome to the live stream. This is Dan the Lost Boy with Project LB52 and Space Monkey Fight Club. Get your avatar and custom song today.
Man, I just love the Mailbag Monday song. Don't know about you guys, but always just puts me in a good mood. And again, thank you to Dan the Lost Boy, good friend of mine, business partner. He's the one that made the both the custom theme song you hear at the start of every Maple Pill episode, as well as the Mailbag Monday theme song. If you guys are interested in getting your own custom theme song, link to Project LB52 in the video description down below. But it's mail day, so we're going to open up some mail here. And there's a photo here that I really appreciate this, guys. If there's stuff you don't want me to share, all you need to do is put for personal view, and that's what these people did. But love the fact that they're showing me them. It looks like having dinner around the table. 3 people watching the Maple Pill, which is sick. And I've got a big handwritten letter here. So I haven't actually checked whether this is for public consumption. April 1st, but it's no April Fool's joke. I appreciate that. All right. So I'm going to read this because I don't see anything telling me not to read it. Let me just see here. Again, I really appreciate these. This one's handwritten as well. So, and handwritten well, which is like bonus points. So, hey, Matt, we're writing to you from the Enclave. Ooh, it sounds like you guys have your own citadel. Love it. The 3 of us. Man, it's been a while since I've read oh man, I can't even think of it right now. I'm not even high for this. What's handwriting? Cursive. Man, it's been a while since I actually had to read cursive. So I'm not even sure what the first one is. Man, this is embarrassing. Something free faster and Pawatsky. Oh, okay, here. I'm gonna pull this off. Pawats. Is that a I? Pawatsik or Pawatsik. Okay, I appreciate you spelling it out for me that way. Are writing to you from the off-grid cabin that Free Faster has been self-building with Hannah. Okay, there we go. With Hannah since 2020. Pawatsik dropped in on his way back home from a work trip in Kampu Kessing. We just finished eating dinner and watching the Maple Pill as we do almost every weeknight at 7 p.m. Appreciate that, guys. The three of us are on the same page as you when it comes to self-sufficiency, self-reliance, and wanting less government intervention in our lives. And that's awesome. And I love the fact that you guys were watching it together, and that you guys already have your own little citadel with your cabin. Pawatsik and Hannah have known each other for over 25 years as family friends, and Hannah's husband, Free Faster, has known him for 15 years. Pawatsik visited the Enclave a couple of months ago on his way home from another work trip, and after the events of the past couple of years, we realized we had so much more in common with many shared views on politics and freedom. We got to know each other on a deeper level. Despite Pawatsik being of a different generation, which has been cool. If you are willing to speak out against popular opinions, you may find there are far more people with common sense. Really do agree with that. And that's why, to me, the maple pill is so important here, right? The idea of like having this show is about creating like common knowledge, right? That like, hey, I'm not okay with what's going on. I think there's more people out there like me that are not okay. And when we're all willing to speak out, that honestly gives so much support to others that have been sitting on the sideline that maybe feel isolated, right? Tying it back into the conversation we had earlier in the show, one of the reasons that I think the state hates religion so much is it gives a sense of belonging, right? It creates deeper social bonds and connections amongst people. It makes them not feel alone. And the state wants you to feel alone, depressed, scared, fearful, every bad emotion you can think of, because then you need someone to come save you. And hey, that's when the super state can come in. So yeah, again, really agree with that point. Over the past few years, Hannah and Free Faster have been working on increasing our self-reliance skills and been moving towards a more independent lifestyle. Thanks to Elon Musk and Starlink, which honestly, that is a game changer for these rural areas, right? That's what we've got here as well. Our dream of living at the lake has become a reality as we can now work remotely. That's amazing. And honestly, I bet there's a lot more people out there that could, in theory, work either partially remotely or full-time remotely if you were willing to just honestly have a tough conversation, right, at work. And the real key, I think, in my opinion, to being able to work remotely, if currently it's not offered for your position, assuming that it's at all practical, right? So again, if you're literally like working on a factory floor, probably not going to work out too well. But for a lot of knowledge-based workers, a lot of like computer-oriented work, I think the key is be a superstar, right? Like be someone at work that like your work wants, right? Where you're very clearly a net accretive asset to the organization. And if you're really providing more value than you're taking from the organization, when you make a proposal like the idea of working remotely, honestly, and I personally have a bias here, but I suspect a lot of my viewers are not like I assume most of you guys have a work ethic. I don't know how else to say it. And because I imagine a lot of you have a work ethic, you're probably one of the better workers at your job, right? Or at your place of employment. And that gives you a lot more power than you realize. And it's something that, if I had a time machine and could go back, when I was working for the pharmaceutical company, I probably would push myself a lot more. To be like, yo, no one else is going to put up with shit. No one else is going to work as hard as you. No one else understands what's going on the way you do. You've got more leverage here than you realize. And so that's awesome to hear that you guys are able to work remotely. We started hunting back in 2017 and gardening in 2018. Tonight's dinner is a delicious sirloin roast from a deer Hannah harvested this past November. That's epic, guys. I love it. On our 100-acre parcel. We even learned to butcher our game ourselves and enjoy knowing where our food comes from and how it has been processed. Love everything about this letter and 100% agree with that. I think, again, people being more careful about their inputs, right? Whether we're talking about like social media, whether we're talking about like close relationships, your friends and family, or whether we're talking about like the food you actually consume, understanding that we're the sum of our inputs. And for a lot of people, myself included, like when I was growing up, no one just really explains that, right? Like you maybe hear the phrase, you are what you eat, but that's about it. No one really explains that, like, hey, you know what? Like all these crazy processed foods, all these, uh, all these seed oils, all this processed sugar. None of this stuff is like your body wasn't designed for this. And so it's not going to be effective at processing it either. So again, what you guys are doing is amazing. The nearest city is North Bay, over an hour away. But with a little bit of planning, we get what we need every couple of weeks. Love it. Again, I'm in the exact same spot where I literally go to Kenora we've got a oh shit, what's it called? Wholesale club, which is just like a kind of like a bulk food store. I go there like once a month, like every 4 to 6 weeks, and stock up. And then every now and then I'll go to the local grocery store just for something random. But usually it's never like an emergency, right? And again, there's something powerful about that, right? Like not having that dependency upon the supply chain where you're operating on a just-in-time inventory system for your own personal food needs. No skip the dishes. Tonight's dinner is a Moroccan venison dish based on a internet recipe. That's awesome, guys. That rivals any restaurant meal without the face diaper requirements or former requirements. Yeah. And love everything that you guys are doing here and really appreciate you guys sharing this. Matt, we're grateful to be in your company. Appreciate having you as a part of our echo chamber, and glad to have a show, The Maple Pill, that gives a much more thought-provoking view on current events. Keep fighting the good fight. I really do appreciate that. We hope to meet you in person one day at the Citadel, and if you'd like to drop by the Enclave on your way to it from London sometime, we'd be happy to meet you, have you stay, and share some of our free-range organic venison. Love it. Wishing you all the best, Hannah Free Faster and Pawatstik. Thank you, guys. Those letters honestly do mean the world to me. There's just something that a personal handwritten letter or a typed letter doesn't matter, and especially like the photo as well. Just makes it so much realer, right? Than seeing like, oh, a dozen live streams or X number of views. It can be really easy in this modern era to become like jaded with that. And for me, I'd much rather know that I'm interacting and dealing with a handful of real people than to have thousands of anons that are just like maybe watching. Maybe it's just AI learning. I don't know the difference. And so, yeah, really appreciate you guys sharing that and sending me a letter. I know a few other people have mentioned that they've mailed letters as well. I trust Canada Post will eventually get them here. I am kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so it's actually a whole thing. Like, don't even ask me how I know this, but I learned how the mail gets here. And so there's literally a truck that comes from Thunder Bay that goes to Rainy River. It drops off, though, I think in Fort Francis, and then Fort Francis runs it up to Nestor Falls, and then Nestor Falls distributes it. It seems like a whole process. I'm shocked that we even get daily mail up here. So, but we do, which is wonderful. And Amazon Prime still finds its way here as well. Although I do wish there was someone other than Jeff Bezos that was getting rich off of me and my online shopping. But right now, it's still really the path of least resistance. So it's a compromise I make. But anyways, if you guys have anything you want me to talk about, any questions, jump in that chat tonight. I love when these are two-way conversations. See a couple more chats have gone in, but what's your next event? I'd love to come, and love and respect from Toronto, my brother. Appreciate that, Sean. I think the first like public event we'll be doing here up at the Citadel, right? Which again, it's a hike. You're talking like, just under 20 hours from Toronto. Will probably be July 1st. And what's great is, again, we've got like campgrounds, we've got RV sites, we've got cabins. So look for that. It'll probably be a relatively informal kind of like soft launch to what we're doing here at the Citadel. But again, really looking forward to doing something. And then throughout this year, I think we'll have a handful of different events and things like that. And hopefully next year, like a full roster of unique experiences and events for everyone to, pick from like a la carte menu, right? Figure out what you want to attend. I probably will be hosting some sort of Bitcoin event in the GTA or Southwestern Ontario this year as well, but that's still in the infancy of the planning stages. So just kind of stay tuned for that, and we're good there as well. So appreciate it, P58, because I am just terrible at pronouncing names, especially if I haven't heard someone else say it like at least a couple dozen times. I'm the same sort of person that like when you introduce me to someone, I'm like repeating their hidden my name and like whatever, like, hey, this is Steve, 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 Steve. What'd you say? Oh, god damn it, what's his name? Like literally, it's just in one ear out the other. I don't know. Clearly, software is a little buggy when it comes to names and pronouncing words, but appreciate all you guys. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Seeing how we're not smoking weed tonight, again, we'll do something on April 20th, which is just 2 days away. This will probably be a short mailbag. So again, if anyone's got any questions, any hot takes you want to share, jump in the chat. Otherwise, I just really appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Hope you're having a great Monday. And yeah, as always, like feel free to give me feedback on this show. So, it started off me just kind of wanting to have an outlet to have these sort of conversations without me just like trapping, a friend or a family member in conversation where I just like rant and rave at them for half an hour to an hour at a time, or to keep myself from writing like manifesto long blogs or emails. So that's what it originally became. I definitely don't think that I've tapped into the optimal formula here. Certainly, my lack of virality gives me a decent feedback loop on that. So I am very open to figuring out how we can look at improving this, or if I should be going in a slightly different direction. I definitely want to do more interviews as well. So Hannah Free Faster, if you guys are interested in ever coming on like a Zoom call and doing an interview like we did with Andrew Hines, let me know. Would love to do that. We've got one scheduled in the future. We won't be shooting it until like early May, but with Mike Rosart, I'm hoping to do one with Mark Parvalos from Canada Poly. And if there's anyone else you guys would like, for me to have come on the podcast and do an extended form, like 2-hour conversation about what the hell's going on in the world, how are they preparing for it, and how are they dealing with everything currently going on. I really do look forward to having more conversations like that because I don't know. There's just something about being able, I assume for you guys, because I've had similar experiences with other podcasts that I'm a consumer of, where it's like, it's fun to be a fly on the wall for conversations that you normally don't get exposed to. Right. So when it comes to like real estate and investors, most of them have their kind of scripted story that they've got like the beats to it and they lay it out. And again, the first time you hear it, it's fun, it's interesting, whatever. But once you've heard like a few dozen, real estate stories, it kind of feels like you've heard most of the real estate stories out there. Or either then you just start going chasing for more extremes, like, how it went from being, a meth addict to a millionaire, which again, still fascinating stories to follow. But I really look forward to just hearing how a variety of individuals are dealing with the increased volatility we seem to be experiencing as a society, and how they're looking to insulate themselves, their family, their loved ones from future volatility as well. Because I don't know who to turn to get this information. Again, I try and share the best resources I find, but I don't think there's one definitive resource. While there's some fantastic like survivalist blogs, they usually are lacking on the, like, they're usually all about like prepping, right? And so not a lot of focus on like finances, growing your financial wealth, protecting your financial wealth outside like gold and silver, usually when it comes to those survivalist blogs. And when it comes to like political activism, again, I don't know where to turn to, especially specifically as a Canadian. When it comes to political activism, it seems like the PPC is the best party available to me or a lot of people of a similar perspective to myself currently. But I don't know what would make a political party not ever turn corrupt, right? I think that unless the political party is going to literally like promise to take an axe or a hatchet to our laws, to our legal system, to the bureaucracy, again, it all feels like it's probably at best a measure of triage, right? Where maybe we're going to stop the bleeding, or we'll try and stabilize the patient, but we're probably not going to get them back to where they were or get them in a better position than how we found them. And that's really what, eventually, that's what I want the Citadel, the Maple Pill, everything I'm doing here to be, is that not just being prepared, not just insulating yourself, but actually like thriving and finding a better way to live and thrive and all that good stuff. All right. Well, I feel like I'm rambling. I was just checking the chat. Doesn't look like too many other people jumped in there. So again, appreciate you guys watching this. Classic, smash the like button, all that good stuff. Follow me on Instagram, Matt McKeever Unfiltered, and we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with another episode of Maple Pill. Thanks, guys. And I will do the mailbag song again.
Welcome to the Mailbag Monday Show with your host, Matt McKeever. Let's open some mails, leave some smoke trails. Mailbag Monday. Send Matt a pack and it's gonna be a fun day. Mailbag Monday. Send Matt a pack, live stream every Monday. Mailbag Monday. Send Matt a pack and it's gonna be a fun day. Mailbag Monday. Send Matt a pack, live stream every Monday. Welcome to the live stream. This is Dan the Lost Boy with Project LB52 and Space Monkey Fight Club.